Good morning again. We're going to pick back up in our series on the book of Nehemiah. And it's one that I've received a lot of instruction from God when reading over the years. And I've been really excited to share with you some of these messages. Start today, I was thinking about moments where there's vindication for being wronged. And I was reminded of a missionary friend who told this story about being on a train. And he got on this train and he was in Italy, and often when you're on those trains, you might get in two seats that are facing two other seats. And so he sat down with his newspaper, and there were two men that came and sat down in front of him. And they noticed that he was an American and immediately began talking about him in Italian. They started talking about how much they hated Americans and how this guy was probably very stupid, and he was, how all Americans are terrible. Anyway, they went down this long list of insults and laughed, and he just sat there quietly reading his paper. But the things they were saying, though, were highly offensive. Now, what they didn't know is that he was well known for speaking the best Italian of any American missionary in the country. So, but rather than argue with them and fight with them or tell them how rude they were being, when he came to his destination, he stood up, he looked at them, and he's in perfect Italian and a little bit more complex Italian than they were expecting. He said, "Excuse me, gentlemen, this is my stop. I hope you have safe travels and enjoy your journey." And he began walking away and said their jaws dropped and they froze. Justice, right? The moment where he was vindicated. But rarely are there these moments like this when we're wronged, right? Like these moments where we're mistreated and get somebody to actually feel bad about it in some way doesn't happen. Because it's happened, right? If you've been wronged, somebody talked about you, they betrayed your trust or your confidence. They said that they would take care of something and they didn't. Maybe they insulted you to your face or behind your back. Maybe these are real frustrating. Maybe they said real nice things, but in a mean way, to where you knew they didn't really mean it. They hurt you and they didn't care. Or even worse, were proud that they hit the mark. And this is one of the most painful and frustrating things about life, right? Because people hurt you. People attack you. And I don't think any of us get through life without some of these scars. Some of us carry deep scars from our childhoods where things were done or said to us that we still can't get past. But when these things happen, when they come at us, how we respond shows who we are. And it reveals how committed we are to the one that we serve. And we learn a lot about this from Nehemiah. Now, I want us to go back. I want to remind you about the book of Nehemiah because it's been several weeks since we spent some time there. Nehemiah is a cupbearer to a king of Babylon. It's a time when Israel is in exile. Jerusalem has been captured. The Jews are an enslaved people, basically, in this new empire. And for a long time, they've just been eking out an existence. A message comes to Nehemiah while he's at the palace and is told that the walls of Jerusalem continue to be in shambles and the people are in disgrace. This is an embarrassing thing for them. A culture and a country once so proud and strong is now in ruins. And it says that Nehemiah was moved to tears. He wept. And God puts this vision on Nehemiah's heart to restore these walls, to rebuild these walls. Now, this is a dangerous thing because rebuilding walls is like weaponizing a foreign nation, right? These were not people that are sensitive to the ideals of Babylon, so them building up their walls would look really bad. Nehemiah has a vision that is dangerous, but he knows it's from God, and he prays that God will see it through. And we see some cool miracles happen, right? Not only does the king ask Nehemiah what's wrong, and the king be moved by Nehemiah's plea, but he gives Nehemiah the opportunity to go repair the walls. He gives him the time away. He gives a blessing. And more than that, he pays for the rebuilding efforts and tells all of the governors of the region to leave him alone. He gives them safety. And Nehemiah goes to do that work. And Nehemiah doesn't decide then, okay, I need to rally a bunch of supporters. I need to let everybody know my true intentions. In fact, Nehemiah doesn't tell anyone until he's gotten to Jerusalem and looked at the state of the walls. He doesn't need to build up alliances. He just goes to begin the work. But it doesn't take long before opposition arises. As soon as the rumor gets out that this is going to happen, people who hate the Israelites begin to get upset. In Nehemiah 2:17, it says this, "Then I said to them," and he's talking to the people of Israel. Okay, this is before I'm going to tell you about the opposition. This is when he tells them about the mission they have. He says, "You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and we will no longer be in disgrace." So he does several things here first. He says, "I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me." And it's at this moment that the people reply, "Let us start rebuilding." So they began this great work. So Nehemiah does a couple things. First, he tells them that there's a problem. He says, "We're in trouble. Jerusalem is ruins. The gates are burned." And then he says, "But here's the solution. Let's rebuild it." Because when that happens, not just will we have a new wall, but we can be a proud people again. And he says, "I've had this vision for what we can do, and it's God who's leading it. God has been with me." And those things come together and they are moved to do this great work. And this should be where we get excited because the work has began. They get working. All kinds of people. And we'll talk about this next week. And I really hope that you'll be here next week. We got some special things to do and share on the work of the wall. But before we get there, it's really exciting that all of these folks come together to restore the reputation of Israel. But even with this beautiful vision, there is an ominous cloud that comes in around verse 10 of chapter 2 that tells us that 2 of the regional governors hear about it and they don't like it. It says they ridicule the Israelites here in 2:19. It says, "But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us." "What is this you're doing?" they asked. "Are you rebelling against the king?" Remember, building the wall is very dangerous. "I answered them by saying, 'The God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it.'" Opposition constantly rears its head. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Now, this is an important message because I think sometimes people are surprised. They think if I'm doing God's will, if I'm doing what is right, if I'm moving in a positive direction, things should go well for me. And it does not work that way. Scripture has never gave us reason to believe that that's the way that it works. Opposition almost always comes. It may have happened in your life when you decided to share the gospel with someone. You decided to evangelize, and you found that there were all of these tacks and barriers that kept them from receiving the message. Maybe it was a decision to get spiritually healthy, to begin reading your Bible, to begin being more intentional in prayer. And there were attacks on your time, or there were attacks on your mental state that kept you from even being able to concentrate. Maybe you decided you wanted to repair a relationship. You knew things were off. You knew you needed to do something to make it right. And it seems like the people that you were trying to be back in relationship with made it harder and harder for you to do that. Maybe you wanted to forgive. You know what God says about forgiveness. You know that God intends for his people to be forgiving. If we're going to reflect his character and his value, we need to be forgiving people as well. And yet, as soon as you make that commitment, the opposition arises. You're doing good. You have a vision for what's right. It is God's work. And bam. Nehemiah is doing God's work, right? We've seen all the evidence of that up till this point in the book of Nehemiah. He is doing something great. And he responds in a really beautiful way. He says, God is driving this. He doesn't say, look, he doesn't try to explain himself. He doesn't say, no, don't worry, we're not really a threat. We just like nice walls. He doesn't do any of that. He says, hey, God's with us, so we're building this wall. And then verse 20 is actually really great because he says in a very diplomatic way, let me go back here. He says in a very diplomatic way, but as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. In other words, he says, mind your own business. We're busy. We have a great work before us, and it has nothing to do with you. Now, it would be nice if that was the end of the story, right? It would be nice if they heard that. We were told to mind our business, so we will go mind our business. People who need to be told to mind their business, they don't go away like that very often, do they? If you find a way for that to work for you, please let me know. People who need to go mind your business, even when they're told, it just doubles their resolve. And truthfully, it did not help with these opponents either. And they come back at him several more times. But Nehemiah does a really cool thing. It's a really neat feature of this book. So one of the first places that they come again, after this work is underway, we come to Nehemiah chapter 4. And it says, when Sanballat heard they were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed. He ridiculed the Jews. And in the presence of his associates and the army of Samaria, he said, what are those feeble Jews doing? Will they restore their wall? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from the heaps of rubble, burned as they are? Tobiah the Ammonite, who was at his side, said, what they are building, even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones. And I love this. This is Nehemiah writing it out. He says, this is what they said. They said they're angry, and they say, even if a fox got up on top of it, it would all fall apart. And Nehemiah pauses in his recording, and he says, hear us, our God, for we're despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builder. Later, there's an assassination attempt on Nehemiah. They're trying to get him to come out of the city so they can harm him. And so they tell him that there's a rumor that he's mobilizing an army. They send this letter in, and he's supposed to come out and prove himself and explain to everybody that it's safe. But Nehemiah, as you have seen so far, is very wise and very savvy. He is not about to come out there. It's a dangerous situation. But he says in 6:14, wait, go back here. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking, their hands will get too weak for the work and it will not be completed. But I prayed, now strengthen my hands. The attack comes. He doesn't go out of the city. He doesn't try to prepare him to defend himself. He just says, God, strengthen my hands and don't let their efforts be successful. And at the end of that section, it says, remember, in his prayer, he says, remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, because what they have done. Remember also the prophet Noadiah and how she and the rest of the prophets have been trying to intimidate me. He stops in these moments with these breath prayers. And in all of it, he shows that he is submitting to God, bringing him through this. Now, last time we talked about Nehemiah. Oh, I said Noah. Last time we talked about Nehemiah, we discussed how much he trusted God with every part of the mission. From the king sending him to how the supplies would be received to how he would even need to inspire the people living there to do the work. But one of the hardest places to trust is when you're receiving an attack, right? It's one thing to imagine, okay, I'm going to trust God in his time to take care of these things that need to be done. But when opposition is coming, it's much harder to trust. You see, Nehemiah does not go out and say, let's stop the work and go destroy these enemies. He doesn't remove their threats because they keep coming back. He doesn't go tell the king, you told them to leave us alone and they're not doing it, go get them. He doesn't argue with them and try to get them to stop. He doesn't go to surrounding governors and rally more allies. Nehemiah trusts God with the battle. Nehemiah is not passive. He arms the workers. He prepares them for an eventual attack, but he trusts that the outcome will belong to God, and in the end gives God the glory. He doesn't claim his right to vengeance or pride. He leaves that to God. Now, his prayer is very pointed, right? This isn't a guy saying, God, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. He says, strike them down. I'm going to leave that to you. See, when we're wronged, we want to fight back, right? They insult us, we insult them. An eye for an eye. You cause me pain, I will cause you pain. They talked about us. We want to talk about them. We want to track them down. We want to let them have it. We want to see them hurt and shamed. Or we pull in our defensives and we wall off and we say, I will have nothing to do with you ever again. It is extremely difficult to forego vengeance, to give up your right that you feel to get someone back, especially when they're attacking you. And it's especially frustrating when you are trying to do good. It was a Sunday morning where there was a decision that I had made. I've got two stories around this. You know, you have those moments where you have to make a decision and none of your options are great, right? They're heavy, they're difficult to navigate. And my wife was in the nursery and walked up on a conversation where people were talking bad about me. Now, their conversation wasn't the worst thing, and when they realized that she was coming up in an earshot, they smoothed it over. But she came home very upset. Now, actually, I want to pause for a second. I need you to do something for me. If you ever read about preachers' kids, ministers' kids that grow up and leave the faith, or they grow up and they realize they have these painful moments in childhood, often those are related to hearing church members talk about their parents. Okay, so if you've got something bad to say about me, please don't do it in earshot of my children, okay? Or in earshot of someone who would tell them, please protect their faith. Because bringing that home is very painful. And Kate came back. She was pretty upset. And she said, what are you going to do about it? I said, nothing. Nothing. It's not about tracing people down. I have proved my character enough times. It is not my battle. I trusted God to take care of it. See, we have trouble doing this, right? To say, I'm not going to meddle, I'm not going to take control. We want to trust God, right? But it's hard to do because we don't know how he'll handle it. We don't know when he'll handle it. And the pain is here in this moment, and we would like him to take it away, especially when we're trying to do what is right. We also get frustrated because his solution might be difficult. It might be harder than just fighting it out right now. We would say we trust God, and we do. But usually only with the things that we don't think we can influence in the moment. Or the things that are so far beyond us that we don't want to think about them. We say we can trust God with world peace or hunger or poverty or health. When something is beyond the ability of doctors, then we trust God to take care of it. The big things, the big picture. In baptism, you trust God with the salvation of your soul. But in conflict, do you trust him with your reputation? You trust him with your story, the big picture of your life, but do you trust him with the challenges on each individual page? You trust him with your life, but do you trust him with today? You trust him to win the war, but do you trust him with the battle? See, Nehemiah did. Nehemiah prayed. He was attacked, and he prayed, and he went back to work. Now, what if Nehemiah had spent his time seeking vengeance, mobilizing an army, fighting off the enemies? The wall would never have been completed, and Jerusalem would have remained in disgrace. But Nehemiah knew he had a great work, so he trusted God with the battle. What might it be costing you to not allow God to fight your battles? What might you be missing out on? I had a situation, another one of those where I had to work through a difficult decision, and someone called me very upset with the decision I had made. And it was like once they turned on telling me how terrible I was, they couldn't turn it off. And I received I heard the concern, I explained my position, and they kept coming. And I remember stopping midway through and waiting. And there was a pause, and I said, "You got anything else?" I was told, "No." We hung up, and I remember a little later, I was sitting in Eddie White's office, and I was talking to him about it because it was very painful. And I said, "This is a situation where I don't think we'll ever be okay. Like this person will never apologize. I know how they are. They will not apologize." Now, I had to talk to somebody about it, but I did not obsess. I had a consistent prayer like Nehemiah where I was saying, "God, show me that my life is in your hands." I didn't fight back, though I had plenty of ammo. I was reminded of that constantly when I would allow my mind to go there. But I did not seek retribution. I didn't go try to make allies. And 2 days later, I got a phone call and an apology. Something that I had said specifically, for this to happen, it would take a miracle. See, if I had tried to take control, I would never have been able to see God work a miracle in the heart of somebody I cared about. If I had tried to fight the battle myself, I would not have seen how God works and shapes and changes people. It was painful, but I got a front row seat to the Spirit's power. You might be missing out on opportunities to see miracles. You might be missing out on opportunities to see growth, to see change, to marvel at the Spirit's power. You might be missing out on genuine healing. And you might be missing out on an opportunity to see God glorified through victory in your battle. What if we as a church trusted God with our battles? What if collectively we decided this is how we're going to fight? We're going to fight by trusting God to fight our battles. Don't you think we would be much more at peace? Not just with each other, but in our own spirit. Don't you think that our Facebook pages would reflect more peace? Don't you think our relationships would be stronger? Don't you think we would feel more loved as we left and had more room to give love? A clue that there's a problem in this area of trusting God to fight battles, it often comes up when we begin to talk about evangelism, because one of the first things said would be we have to figure out our own problems before we go reach somebody else, right? If we have to fight all of the battles and then we go beyond, we have to trust God with each of those, because we'd get a lot more done. We'd reach the world a lot faster. The walls of Jerusalem would be rebuilt, and our church would grow. Today, may you trust your Heavenly Father. May you know that He is with you. May you bow your head in prayer and say, God, my life is in your hands. Fight these battles for me. May those enemies who oppose you and attack you and hurt you find that they have not picked a fight with you, but with the God that you serve. Maybe you be willing and able to release your sense of control and give the Spirit room to work. May you trust God to not only win the war in the end, but to fight the battle today. And in the process, may you find peace that enables you to set your hands to a great work. Let's worship.